I want to go across Navtej Sarna first. Sir, given that we're now 1 month into the battle, how hopeful are you that President Biden's visit to Europe will in some senses lead to more meaningful military and diplomatic pressure being made to bear on Russia, which could in some senses bring this mindless war to an end?
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for having me. I think 1 month down into the war, President Biden is doing what he needs to do. There is no promise of what this will result in, but he is making a visit which is very important in its symbolism of a US president flying down to Europe and doing 3 summits in a day, and also visiting Poland, which is at the front line with Ukraine. And this is a message of unity and strength that he will try to convey, that NATO stands together, that Europe stands together, that the G7 are together. From what is coming out of the first meeting, it looks they're keeping their cards close to their chest, but it looks like a strengthening of NATO's presence in terms of battle groups, in terms of air defense and naval defense, and also providing through individual countries more weaponry to the Ukrainians. There will be more discussions, I'm sure, on closing up the loopholes in the sanctions, and possibly trying to get unity on the energy aspects, which has remained a divisive point in Europe, because they're still importing coal, oil, and gas from Russia. So these will be some of the aspects. I think the message will be, we stand together. We will not take an escalation, and they do not want to escalate. I think that NATO Secretary General in his press conference, which has just concluded, was at pains, but more than one occasion, to say that they don't want to do something which will escalate the war. So I think this is very heavy on symbolism, and it will put as much pressure as they can without making it into an escalatory syndrome.
But Ms. Dakota Woods, the fact is the United States so far has been urging others to helping out militarily and economically to some extent, but largely not wanting to do any of the heavy lifting through DC and the arms and equipment that Washington can provide. Is that likely the way it's going to stay, or do you see, to some extent at least, after President Biden's visit now to Europe, America getting more actively involved in trying to bring this to an end?
I think the initial approach by the Biden administration has been very tepid and has been driven more by public pressure and media pressure that we needed to step up. The United States did. And I think that pattern will continue. So I agree with everything that the ambassador just said, that this is a high stakes game. NATO members, the United States in particular, does not want to get militarily involved in Ukraine because of the potential or the likelihood that you would see a military clash between NATO forces, United States forces, and Russian military forces. And so this escalation, a broadening of the war, is what everybody is trying to avoid. So the very sad truth of this assault on Ukraine is the Ukrainians are going to have to fight for themselves. So where the United States and others can really help is militarily continuing the provision of supplies and munitions that enable the Ukrainians to continue fighting. And then on other fronts, and Putin doesn't care about the diplomatic side of things these days, but economically, further constraining, more sanctions, really cutting off Russia from gaining funds, money, that would enable it to sustain its own economy and continue the war fight. So on this latter part here to your question, yes, the United States should be much more aggressive in imposing sanctions and providing more weaponry to the Ukrainians. But also Europe has gotten itself into a real bind at being so dependent on energy, natural gas and oil, as has already been mentioned, from Russia. So to cut themselves off completely would create a very onerous burden on the European economies, on the ability of companies to manufacture things and people to kind of live their daily lives. So becoming dependent on competitors for critical goods is a very high-risk strategy, which is what we're seeing today. So I think public pressure, political pressure will be on the United States and on President Biden to do more and that would be economically and the provision of military support.
Nonetheless,